just relax. This would be fine.
I don't care if it's Ryza. This is as naked as I get. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. It's been a couple of weeks. Mike has been insanely busy. Still is, but he is here for you because we wanted to just get back on the horse, get here and talk about Season 5, Episode 7, Let He Who Is Without Sin. Mike, how you doing? You are a babyface Shorn?
Mostly, yeah.
The pike is gone?
The bike is gone. In fact, it's dramatically black, but...
No, it's just for boys.
Yeah. Keith, what a fun episode to do on your birthday.
Indeed.
It's
yeah.
Quite a present.
Everybody, I don't know anybody who's ever seen this episode that does not have very strong feelings about it. And I will say this at the very top. I have very strong feelings in multiple and conflicting ways about this episode. So by the end, I'm going to have some parts of it that I feel, obviously, it's not a shining moment for kind of anything. However, I will have some points that I think are defensible.
Yeah, it really highlights something we've talked about before, right? In that, so this week I did not get 2 viewings. I only got the one that we did with the patrons over on patreon.com/K&M. And as the mysterious Anne, friend and patron of the show, commented on the Patreon page, this was the most enjoyable viewing she's ever had of the episode, and I feel the same way. We had such a fun camaraderie and some jokes and shenanigans while we were watching that it really colored the experience positive. That doesn't mean it's going to hold up under our laborious scrutiny today, but that the atmosphere in which you watch a property does color the experience, and so that's
it's huge.
Yeah.
It is enormous in terms of your experience of it. And I will say that also the number of times you watch it, because I actually watched this 3 times. Once just cuz, and I'm like, you know what? It's not nearly as bad as I thought it was. Then I watched it with everybody. I'm like, no, it's pretty bad. And then I watched it a 3rd time to note it. I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. So we're gonna do all of the layers of this episode. Very excited to get into it, but we cannot get into it yet because we have to talk about last week's, 3 weeks ago, legendary episode, Trouble with Tribbles, or Trials and Tribulations.
Oh, what a juxtaposition, my favorite word. What a back-to-backer.
I mean, I told you you're gonna get some whiplash.
Ooh.
And ironically, these were filmed in opposite. Yes, it was filmed differently, but whatever. So let's just talk about what you thought about Trials and Tribulations. Now, if you want me to read your comments, Mike, how does one do that?
Easy peasy. You just give us the cash, baby. The sweet, sweet, sweet cash. You can do so over at patreon.com/K&M, or you can give the super tip down below, potentially, if YouTube has allowed it this week. Okay, well, there you go. So, here is what you had to say, starting with our good friend and patron Joshua Cronin, who says, this episode is pure genius. Now, if I really wanted to prank everybody, I'd wait till next week and read all of these comments about letting us with us. It'd be funny. Joshua continues. Fun to watch the TOS. I did get whiplash right there, because I forgot how we do this, because it's been a while, and I was like, what? But now it makes sense. It was last week.
Yes, it's from last week's. Yeah. Fun to watch the TOS episode, and then this after is the way to do it. Mike, I'm so excited for you. They did an amazing job blending it in like we were really there. One of my top 10 favorite Deep Space Nine episodes, giving it 96 self-sealing stem bolts. Keith, I had no idea you didn't have an original series O'Brien. Glad you do now. We had a live unboxing if you missed it last week. from our good friend Colin Dagan. Sent a care package. Really exciting. It's on the shelf right behind me right this very minute. Jason Moe says, those goodies you received from Colin are fantastic. Lots of talk about the toys, obviously. I love the red shirt O'Brien and finally managed to track him down for my collection too. You guys were so close to giving this episode a perfect score. Personally, I think it's worthy. This is one of the 2 Star Trek episodes that I would award a flawless 100 STEM bolts. The other is not a Deep Space Nine episode. It's a classic series episodes I will not name here, but I will say it involves a city on the edge of forever. Ooh, hard to piece that together.
Keith, let me ask you a question real quick before you continue. Mm-hmm. Is your iPhone near you or your microphone?
Yeah, I hear it. I keep moving it further and further away.
Could you throw it towards the
I don't think it's that. No, it's the cable.
Guys, it wouldn't be an episode if we weren't talking about the audio. Oh, I wish you could have heard it. We had feedback in the theater during our tech rehearsal a couple days ago, and I stopped everything, and I sent everyone on a wild goose chase to find this feedback. We did find it.
Yeah, well, there you go. See, now it's a grounding issue on my microphone, which I thought I fixed with a quarter. So I'll just hold on to the button. I mean that literally. Look at that. I know. There's a quarter in there to fix the ground.
You know Mike would have bought a new microphone.
I know. Mike has a very different income and budget than Keith does.
It's not just that. He's just also an idiot. So.
Yeah, well, as I'm going to say many times in this episode, 2 oppositional things can be true at the same time. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there you go. All right. So, Jason continues. So, Trials and Tribulations is therefore my number 1 ranked Deep Space Nine episodes. There are many amazing Deep Space Nine episodes still to come, many that have much more powerful and impactful plot points and character arcs, but none of them quite match the magic and pure fun of this particular episode. I like what Keith said about how this did an excellent job of bringing together 2 different types of Star Trek shows and making them work beautifully together. It reminds me a bit of a recent crossover that Strange New Worlds did with Lower Decks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, damn right.
We love that one.
But as awesome as that episode was, Deep Space Nine did it first and did it better. 100 STEM bolts. YouTube viewer says the DVD set of Season 5 of Deep Space Nine has a special feature on it, the making of Trials and Tribulations, which the 2 of you would probably enjoy. Yes.
Should be in our folder, buddy.
Yeah, yes, no, and Josh Cronin sent it via Facebook, too.
Oh, cool.
The Cardassians are not exactly returning the orb for no reason. The ball was set rolling on this. Vedic Bareil died in Season 3, Episode 13 in order to secure a Bajoran-Cardassian peace treaty. He mentioned that the Cardassians would return the orbs later after they became invested in the peace process. Yeah, fair enough. A mere 3 episodes later, Grand Nagus Zek sells the Orb of the Prophets back to the Bajorans. The only way Zek would have got the orb is he bought it from the Cardassians. I don't know if the DS9 writers got into the weeds on this one, but it makes sense that some corrupt official would sell an orb to Zek, figuring the government was just going to foolishly give the orb to the Bajorans. Fair enough. I like the detail that by the time of Deep Space Nine, Raktaginos are available in every replicator, but back then, they were Klingon only. Kind of like how common sushi is in every grocery store and convenience store, where you didn't see it outside of Japanese restaurants not that long ago. Yeah, exactly right. Bashir wanting to bang his great-grandmother goes back to horny dum-dum Bashir. Though in fairness, it wasn't necessarily his great-grandmother, it was potentially his great-grandmother. That is a loophole I'd walk through. I still don't like those odds, though apparently I had a very attractive great-grandmother. My grandfather served in the Air Force in World War II, and he had to hide his mother's picture because all of his fellow airmen were lusting after his mom. Speaking of World War II, the actor who played Scotty served in the Canadian Army during World War II and lost his finger during the D-Day invasion. In most shots, Scotty is hiding or at least de-emphasizing his hands. Yeah, we talked about that on the Toys episode. Fascinating. Darwin is a really terrible spy and deserves to be exiled from the Klingon Empire. Agreed. Terrible. Garrick would never monologue his entire villain plan immediately after capture. Yeah, exactly. This was a tightly written, fun, light-hearted episode, mainly because Darvin just villain monologued, so they didn't have time to do the investigation. In my opinion, this is the best time travel episode of any non-animated television series, 95 out of 100. The animated series crush live action with their time travel plots. Roswell That Ends Well even does the grandmother boinking better. That's funny. I really hope the Deep Space Nine writers are careful with the Orb of Time as a plot device and don't use it to push forward a very plot hole-filled continuity break, ultra-depressing, zero-fun time travel episode in a later season. I am curious what you're referring. I don't remember exactly what you're talking about, but I'm sure we'll get there. JD says, Mike having a Quark shrine makes sense. That stand with the weird symbols is the one you didn't recognize as the Vidians from Voyager. Ah. I have an O'Brien on the card, but I made a custom one for a loose one. Oh, that's a good idea. They didn't rebuild entire sets, just sections of the sets of the original series. The behind-the-scenes feature they made shows a lot of that. The reason O'Brien's shirt was a little misfit was a joke regarding how the red shirts of each week were extras that wouldn't be on screen long, so they had a few dozen generic shirts in the red for the extras. That makes really good sense. So the joke is O'Brien is wearing one of the off-the-rack shirts. Nice. Cisco's "Let's Go" to Horny Dax is my favorite moment of this. This is such a fun, glorious episode that builds on a great episode. I'm with you. I give it 98 self-sealing stem bolts. To what Keith was talking about with intergenerational fans, there's something I have a hard time understanding is the way that people can hold on to their own childhood, or child college eras, as sacred, but think that nothing a new generation can do can be as great as them, which is absolute hogwash. I wish I could go to the Ticonderoga too, but that's a long drive. I mean, JD, you're 1,000% right. I think it's part of human nature to, to sort of attach at a certain level. And, I will say Aliens is the greatest action movie that is ever made, and nothing will ever top it, ever, because of the way they did it when I was 7 years old, whatever it is. And I realized that that's because that's what I imprinted on. That's just what happens. Harry Pothead says 100 stem bolts. Is there any question about that? This is the perfect episode. What do you want from a fan service episode, if not this? Well put. Worf's Big Ol' Boot Shiv says Touchstone Star Trek episode. Have to give it 98 self-sealing stem bolts. Also 100% agreed with Harry Pothead. Plenty of places to get Trek content online. I come for the K&M goodness. You guys rock. Thank you, Worf's Boot Shifts. That makes me feel good. Sorry we've been off for 3 weeks.
Yeah, I love the sentence, thank you, Worf's Boot Shifts, is something you can only get here.
And it makes perfect sense, and everybody watching knows exactly what I mean and exactly what's happening, and it's a callback to a Toys episode, a different show from like years ago. And then,
Sorry, before I forget, I have to tell this anecdote. It's really funny, and you guys all appreciate it. So, in this day and age of technology, as I am directing this show, and I'm also trying to be in it, I've been recording the runs of the show so that I can go back and watch notes later, and then I can refer to timestamps of the stumble through so that people know where I'm talking about. It's very great. But things have been busy, and we didn't want to let too much content time go by, so we recorded the watch along for this last week, and we're getting the review out this week. Long story short, I've said it again. There I go again. That's my bugaboo. So anyway, I just in my brain fog uploaded the Deep Space Nine watch along for 507 to the drive and did not recognize it until rehearsal the next day. Guys? So not just the Plaid Guys, the entire company. The entire company watched the episode of us watching the Ryza episode, which is a horny episode.
Which is basically just an hour and a half of butt plug jokes. That's all it is.
Luckily,
it's Mike by himself, because everyone else is doing it via chat.
Yeah.
Mike says butt plug like 30 times. Just a man by himself watching a 30-year-old TV show saying that over and over again. So
luckily I was able to catch it in the wee hours of the morning and pull it out, but I'm sure enough of those guys saw it. I did get a couple of funny texts. So
hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can see who the professionals are who tried to do their homework because they're the ones who saw how unprofessional we are. Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. Whew. All right. So, Kevin Miles says this is one of 3 episodes I give 100 self-sealing stem bolts. I'd be interesting to guess which episodes you do. Is that just of Deep Space Nine, or is that all of Trek? We'll have to talk about that when we get to the end. Carl Fisher says this is one episode that when I was recording them on VHS to pass around in school, teachers and adults in my life wanted to borrow the tape as well because, of course, of the original series crossover.
I wonder if you could guess, maybe this is something we can do on our AMA, which is coming up. What if there are any remaining episodes, Keith, that you think I will rank higher than this? Because if I gave it a 98 or a 99 in this week, so is there anything that will beat that?
Yes.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
At least one, probably a couple others.
Okay.
That at least have a really decent shot.
Okay.
For sure. This is not my favorite episode of Deep Space Nine. So
okay, that colors it a little bit.
So we'll see. We'll see. Hibernation Pod, new patron, welcome.
Yeah.
Says when it first aired, it felt like one of those offers that I could have cared less about. Interesting. My older brother, who I detested a great deal, actually liked it a lot. I wasn't interested in the original series at the time, so it didn't mean much. The fact that he liked it as much as he did made me like it even less. A silly reason, I know. The reality was I didn't get to watch the first several seasons in a solid order, so I really didn't get what this had to do with the main storyline, which I was fascinated in. Ultimately, a rewatch 2 decades later, and I developed a much more appreciation. Listening to this week's podcast and understanding way more about the production and effort that went into making this episode only adds to it. So if I rated it in 1996, 50. In 2016 or so, 70. Today, 80 self-sealing stem bolts. I mean, talk about, we were saying at the beginning, the context that you watch these things. And context includes, where did you watch it, who'd you watch it with, what were your mood, but also like whether somebody else likes it or dislikes it. I mean, certainly plays a big part in and like,
great example. Think about like a couple of the big heartbreaks you've had in your life, and then like pinpoint that year, and then go back and look at the albums of that year. Music is a big thing. And think about how many of those albums you thought you hated because you got dumped at that time. And then you go back and listen, you're like, you know what, that wasn't too bad. It's not John Mayer's fault.
It's not John Mayer's fault. Probably is.
It may be.
But yeah, that's fascinating. And I totally get it. Colin Dagan says, this is Colin, who of course sent all of our things to unbox last episode. The tribbles were actually created, the ones that he sent, by a company called Creatology, and the little puffs are marketed as pom-poms. They come in several colors. I dumped the yellow ones because they didn't match the tribbles from the episode. So technically, I didn't make them as much as market them as something else for Trekkers. But thanks for the kind words about everything. And let me tell you what I did on the bookshelf. You can't see it because it's way behind. I was like, how do I display these tribbles? I couldn't figure it out. And what I realized, because I have a Deep Space Nine shelf, I just opened the tribbles and I just sprinkled them through all the Deep Space Nine figures.
Oh, that's fun.
So now so my Deep Space Nine shelf is infested with tribbles. Super, super fun. All right, Mike, I'm gonna go and grab something to deal with this grounding issue. Why don't you, out of order, just out of willy-nilly, introduce our patrons?
I think it's a great idea, Keith. As we mentioned about the great time, one of the big things our patrons get, and this is at any level because we had a long discussion about really wanting just support at any level to unlock all the content, but we can let you, the viewers who enjoy our stuff, decide how much you're able to contribute monthly. to help us offset our time and efforts. And that's not right. Pretend you didn't see that. Guys, it's Keith's birthday. Make sure to send him happy birthday missions or messages. And the people who have chosen to do so are here on this very list, and we appreciate every one of them. Their names are Bryant, Kimball, Beersock, Jason Moe, Peter Bank, Frank Rinch, Quarks Bar, Maritanith, Joshua Cronin, Ryan Chesley, Andrew Hayes, and the mysterious and that entire mysterious household, Worf's Big Ol' Boot Shifts, Charles Babbage, Harry Pothead, Allen, Anton Thies, Carl Fisher, CRM Productions, Nikolay Ivanovich Lobachevsky Delusions, at noon, YouTube viewer, James Hubbard, Hibernation Pod, welcome, JD Makes, Colin Dagan, Chris Mitchell, CRM, Pat, Joshua Cronin, JD, Lutz, and Wyatt Eldridge. That is a great growing team. Chancellor Jen Quarks Bar, they are our founding sponsors. And we are just so appreciative of everybody. I hope Keith has to make a second slide pretty soon. Tell a friend.
We're getting close.
We're getting close. We have a lot of fun on the watch-alongs. It's one of my favorite things to do during the week. I think the patrons would attest to. We have a lot of fun. And if you can't join us live, they are live streamed. You always get them on the VOD on our patron page, plus AMAs, plus other stuff. Keith and I can't wait to be done the show. I mean, we're just starting, but we got stuff planned for you guys. Appreciate you. Patreon.com/KNM. Here we are.
Yeah. Well, look, once you get into the run.
Yeah. This week,
of the show, you'll have more time.
Yeah. K&M Geekly is going to come back. I'm seeing a bunch of movies I want to talk about, so I'll force Keith to sit through that.
Oh, there you go. Although, before we do another episode of Geekly, we have to talk about what kind of a sociopath puts up season 4 of Dark Side of the Ring and then unmounts it.
Did it unmount?
Yeah.
It should be back now. When's the last time you checked?
Last night.
Oh, okay, I'll double check why that happened.
Oh, believe me, I check that frequently because that's my jam.
The whole season should be up. Okay, cool. I'll work on it.
Yeah, well, I watched the first 2 episodes and then no, it's gone. All right. Anyway, what do you say? Let's talk about this episode. Let he who is without sin, because for those of he who are not without unlimited time would like us to finally talk about what we're talking about, which aired on November 11th, 1996, coming into the holiday season in 1996.
Guess what? We are a week away from me getting my driver's license and turning Sweet 16, baby.
Woo! Wow.
Yeah.
You had the same hair color then as you do now, or were you graying by 16?
19 is when it started for me. But
19 when it started. Okay, fair enough.
And not just started, also finished. It was like pretty much done by then. I started dyeing my hair when I was 19, yeah.
Did you really?
Uh-huh.
No kidding. But the Silver Fox at 19 is very different than at 40-something.
I love it. In fact, when I went to the salon to get this done for Plaid, a bunch of the girls came over, the salon ladies came over and were like, don't do it. It looks awesome. And I was like, I'm not doing it out of choice.
It's not for pleasure, it's for business. Yeah. All right, well, there it is. Speaking of important business, the top song. Can't wait to hear Mike sing some of it. Of course, it was No Diggity, Blackstreet featuring Dr. Dre.
No diggity, I gotta back it up to my great grandmother and bang that up. Just like Bashir, no diggity. I'm so embarrassed. That's on the internet now.
Clip it for out of context. Somebody, all right, here it is. Somebody out there, clip that, make it your ringtone, and send us a video of that coming out of your phone. And I don't know what I'll do, but that would make my. We'll definitely play it on the air, and that would that's gonna make me very, very happy.
Oh boy.
Whew, the top movie was none other than Ransom, the Mel Gibson revenge movie, sort of set up like Liam Neeson's entire later career, except less problematic.
Is that the one where he's like a bodyguard for?
Oh, I don't know.
And he's also sort of kind of. I think it's Julia Roberts, and I think he's also sort of a little bit of a stalker.
Is that the one? Is that the one that Patrick Stewart's in? No. There are people out there screaming at me. You look it up. I'll keep talking. So, we're going to skip TV because we've been going on for 10,000 years. I'll talk about what Voyager was doing. It should come as no surprise that they were doing Future's End part 2 because they had done part 1 just the previous year. It feels like the previous year. And that was what was happening. Mike, was Patrick Stewart in Ransom? Oh, wait. It wasn't
this
that.
This is a totally different movie I'm thinking of.
Totally different. I know
Rene
which movie you're
Russo,
talking about.
Gary Sinise.
Yeah.
Lev Shriver was in it. Donnie Wahlberg.
That's
quite a cast.
Quite the cast. Some of which problematic, some of which less so.
Yeah.
Some of which problematic, but I can't talk about it.
To answer the question at point, it is not the movie we are thinking of.
There's one of them. Here's a little teaser. Mm-hmm. One of them is very problematic, and I know about it for reals, but nobody else knows about it yet, so I can't talk about it.
Cool. Are we gonna know about it?
I'll tell you off air. I'm not saying it on air.
Meant is there an expose coming, or I mean that was 96.
No, there was a pretty hardcore NDA. I think we've all moved on, but
well.
Anyway, that's a stupid thing to say on the internet.
Thanks, legal system.
Yeah, right. All right, this episode was directed. Mike, did you know that Rene Auberjonois directed this episode?
I knew that he has directed episodes, not this one. I'm sorry.
Well, he directed this one.
They gave him the Sexy Planet one?
They gave him the sexy. Well, they wish it were sexy, but
yeah, that's true. I mean, who better to handle with care just a damning expose on weather manipulation than Rene?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about it. It's somewhere in the trivia, but I did not enjoy this experience. This was written, ironically, by big heavy hitters Robert Hewitt Wolf and Ira Stephen Bear, which leads me nicely into a little segment we call... Now Keith, waste your time.
I can't wait.
With trivial trivia.
I'm not allowed to read this anymore, so I really need all the details, Keith. I need to know what happened.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about what happened. But first off, I'm going to point out that Ira Stephen Bear, who is now the showrunner, the legendary showrunner, has taken us through so many wonderful things, also wrote the next-gen episode Captain's Holiday, which introduced Risa as a planet. So, which it made sense for him to write on this episode, because he invented it. Mm-hmm. And lots going on behind the scenes, including in September of 1996, while they were filming this, Alexander Siddig's and Nana Visitor's son was born during the production of this episode. Visitor was thus unable to appear and is credited only.
And she's like, thank you.
Yes, and I think Alex Siddig had said later that, like, I was so distracted in this episode, I can barely watch it.
Until one scene in particular, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
So
is Keith.
Ronald D. Moore says, this is a show we all wish we had a second crack at. Director Rene Auberjonois comments, it was not my happiest time as a director. Even Alex Siddig disliked the episode, particularly his own performance. As I said, Nana Visitor had given birth to their son the night before he shot the scene where he and Lita break up, and according to Siddig, he had never been so unfocused on set as he was shooting that scene. And happily today, I don't believe we would ask a father whose first child had been born like 3 hours later to come and film an episode on location. So, in an interview on the podcast Shuttlepod's Show, great podcast done by some of the Enterprise folks, Ira Stephen Bear identified this as one of 2 episodes he regrets making. And the other I will not mention yet, because we have not arrived there yet.
Okay.
But possibly the most problematic episode of Deep Space Nine.
Awesome.
We'll get there. We will get there.
I think it needs to be analyzed by 2 heterosexual white guys. I think that's what it means.
I mean, everybody. And normally it's 2 random straight white dudes with beards.
Yeah.
But only one of them has a beard right now. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you're using your talking on the internet credibility.
Yeah, that's true. Although give me another hour, it'll be back.
Yeah, he's Italian, folks. He's Italian. You should see his back. I got him an agent with that.
Uh-huh.
And lastly, in the scene where Worf walks in on Lita and her Ryzian companion in the purple mesh tank top doing some hardcore hand-holding, Lita was originally naked and in a bathtub. This is evident because they filmed it, and it was in the original 30-second promotional spot available on StarTrek.com. So that is what the scene originally looked like. There was no birthday cake involved. It was just off screen.
Different cakes.
Different cake. But yes, so that was what they originally did. And it's crazy. What blows my mind, right, is that they obviously sent the notes to the producers or whatever. They're like, no, we can't do that. And so they refilmed it while they were still working on that episode. And yet that shot still got into the trailer, which aired like a month after they filmed it. So I wonder if that was a oops. And
they knew it would sell. Or somebody different was cutting the trailers.
I mean, but yeah, I mean, I guess. I feel like that was an intentional oops. I feel like they were setting us up.
The internet says, thank you very much.
Indeed. Okay, so let us talk about our guest stars this week, which include Monty Markham as Pascal Fullerton, Chase Masterton as Lita, of course, Frank Kopyak as the Bolian aide, and with a special appearance by none other than Vanessa Williams as Arandis. Broadway's Vanessa Williams. Vanessa Williams, I believe was she Miss America?
Yes.
At one point? Yeah. Well, there it is.
Miss Universe, Miss America.
One, I don't know. They're all stupid.
She's Vanessa Williams.
She's Vanessa Williams. Needs no other introduction.
She's basically selling you a timeshare this episode. That's her function.
We're going to talk about it. But first, we got to go into the screening room and do it.
Wait, Keith, I'm getting a phone call. No diggity. Gotta bang grandma.
No diggity. Gotta bang grandma was the quote. Get that on a ringtone, folks. I'm dead serious. We will stop the show. We will show this. I want this to be somebody's ringtone. Thanks for my dunce cap. All right.
We used to do these big birthday blowouts on our other show, but now it's just like, if you get a funny hat, you did good.
I'm surprised. I'm amazed. Considering all that's on your plate right now, and the fact that I hate my birthday, I'm really shocked.
Well, that's why I couldn't ignore it completely, because you hate it.
You had to find a way to bother me. Yeah. That's great. All right, so in our teaser, guess what? Morn's got a date with a Federation officer. Good for Morn. We do sort of get the idea that Morn gets around a little bit here on the station.
He's sex positive.
He's bringing flowers. But this, kids, if you're playing keep track at home, it's called foreshadowing that there's going to be a lot of banging on this episode. Odo and Sisko are discussing O'Brien's naming their baby Sean. Then Dax shows up, and she's been pretty beaten up by Klingon Trill sex. Sisko asks if there's a way to do this without injuring yourself, but Dax says, that's kind of the point. And I think, there's so much discussion about this episode about Worf and Dax's relationship and Worf's behavior through all of this, and whether or not he's being abusive throughout this whole thing. And part of it comes in the sort of violence in their sex.
Interesting.
To which I would say, if it were non-consensual, then I would completely agree. But I think in when it comes down to Dax and Worf's sex, it is clearly consensual from both parties. So at least that part of it, I do not find him to be in the wrong if they're both 100% on board. Whatever type of
100%.
sex pleases you, like that I'm going to take off of the table as we go through our discussion here.
I completely am in collaboration with you, because what I think I've enjoyed about the relationship thus far, especially the sexual aspect, is how it is handled with a sense of consent and play/whimsy. I think it's, a lot of times when we discuss in our culture, like BDSM or like dominance or the submissive dominance and all that kind of stuff.
Other than vanilla,
yeah, it's often looked through a lens of like danger and or mystique, and I don't think it always has to be that. I'm sure there are plenty of folk who introduce that into their relationships with a sense of play and
if the danger and mystique is part of it, as long as it's consensual.
I guess my base point is that I think that they have done, in the limited time we've seen it, yeoman's work in showing it as consensual and as fun and enjoyable for them.
Yeah. Now, some of Worf's other behavior, we're going to get into it.
Yes.
But that part of it, I think those are my feelings. So Dax says they're going to take a vacation to Ryza. Odo and Sisko are naturally surprised that she talked Worf into it, as are all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Worf arrives and is annoyed that she told them that they're going to Ryza. And he's jealous because she had lunch with Captain Baudet, the transparent skull guy and former lover of Dax that we have mentioned previously on the series. He declares it improper, and she says, "You gotta trust me," and he says, "I do trust you, I do not trust Captain Baudet." And I wrote, this is not going to be a good episode for Worf. But Dax calls him out for being controlling. And so we're introducing Worf being controlling and jealous in this situation and judgmental. And it's not a good look. It's kind of ugly. And I think a lot of people criticize about this episode a little bit of a lack of accountability for that, and the way that Dax pushes back or accepts it or doesn't push back hard enough. And we'll talk about it as we move forward, because we're gonna repeat this beat a lot. But it's just something that is to be thought about throughout all of this. And I think there's two different ways to think about it. One, what do we feel about it in canon? How do we feel about this as a layer of Worf's character? And then we can think about, well, was this type of character being portrayed, how was that handled responsibly? There's a lot to come. So
there's a lot of lenses to look through it too, right? And we'll talk about them. At least I would like to, because you have the lens of okay, a lot of the relationships he's seen modeled were coming from humans. So this is a very human color, right?
Yep.
And additionally, he is then layering on top of that how are Klingon relationships supposed to be,
right?
And also, then we have to look through the lens of, it's not just Worf. It's Dax. The way they have Dax handle it, I think, actually solves some of the problems, but introduces other problems as far as canon is concerned. So I look forward to the conversation, because I think it is the conversation, right?
For sure it is. Anyway, so let's continue. So then Bashir and Lita show up and declare that they're going to be the third and fourth wheels on the runabout. Worf again says, "We have much to discuss," and Dax looks bemused by this. Unclear. Later, Sisko walks them to the airlock and talks about the good times that he had on Ryza with Dax before. Worf is again jealous. They arrive at the airlock, and naturally, Quark is there to be the fifth wheel. And he's excited, and Worf is miserable, setting up, oh my goodness, the hijinks and fun this episode is going to be. Can't wait to see all the oh, no, we're not going to do that. So, in Act 2, on the runabout, Lita continues being a waitress for everybody but Quark. He is naturally being annoying, and he mentions having a cabin that must be really small on a runabout to have individual cabins. Because, I know that it's bigger than what we see, and I know that on the Next Gen episode, we see it has a larger room with a conference table and that kind of stuff. But, even still, is it really big enough to have cabins? I don't know. Somebody show me an inside layout. I'd be curious about that. However, Quark did bring gifts, and he gives everybody but Worf a Horgon, which is a symbol to the locals that you want to bang. I'm surprised, Mike, you don't have a Horgon yet. with all of the Horgon discussions that we've had.
I mean, enough people have my address, Keith, that I would accept it.
Well, they don't want you coming to their house offering Jamaharong, so they're like, because they know if you mail, it's like, hi, I'm Mike Indeglio from K&M Geekly.
It's funny to me because Keith, I'm one of the folks who has had the privilege in my life to travel to Easter Island, and so I have seen the original Horgons, because the Horgons look a lot like the Easter Island Moai.
Yes, well, I will resist. We're going to have to mark this episode explicit. There's no getting around it. Have to resist. Were you able to resist making out with that island? That's my question. Were you able to resist salt burning that island? That's my question.
Mostly, yeah.
Okay, very good. So we beam down to Ryza, and it's basically Sandals with sex workers. Quark heads off with 2 women immediately. Worf is naturally not having any fun, and he masks his anxiety with judgment. And you can see that they've put down a bunch of turf to create a grassy section next to the beach. So I think for me, some people might come at me for not defending Worf, but trying to understand his behavior here, and I think he's just dealing with a tremendous amount of anxiety, which is causing all of this. We'll get into it. So
before we do, though, Keith, I think it's.
I was wondering what you were searching for and about.
I wanted to find like the Mike with the Horgons making a face, and I found one I think that is appropriate for this episode.
Great. That is the face of someone who 100% salt burned that island.
I mean, just like ancient, world famous heritage artifacts, and I can only make a face like that.
And you're like, should I? I guess I should.
Should I? Or have I?
Have I? Will I again? We'll see. A whole bunch of little Mike trees growing up out of the dirt, like, kill me!
The next Moai pops up and it's just got dyed hair.
Yikes. So Dax shows him her 90s TVG approved one-piece bathing suit, and he says some romantic stuff. Then, see, Quark is giving the face that you gave, and that's 100% the same
Quark's
face.
in a different episode, and I want to be there.
Oh, 1,000,000%. And then Vanessa Williams shows up. She's old friends with Dax, and definitely got busy with Curzon back in the day. In fact, Mike, do you remember what Curzon and Vanessa Williams did?
No.
She sexed him to death.
Right, that's right.
We wondered, how did Curzon die? He died doing it with Vanessa Williams.
As would I?
As would anybody, yeah. Naturally, once again, Worf is jealous and annoyed.
I mean, that one I'll give him.
Well, sure. I mean, it is a natural feeling to be overcome.
Yes. I mean, you gotta imagine, like, someone who has, in many ways, been around for hundreds of years is going to have had a much longer dance card than you did. So, right? So you're gonna have to get over it, buddy. If you're gonna get into that relationship, you should suck it up.
Well, for sure, because Dax's body count is much higher than Worf's.
Yeah.
And because of who Worf is as well. And like, here's where I get into it. Like, I identify a lot with Worf in this episode, in the parts of myself that I had to overcome to be a better person. But the anxiety that he is feeling and the ways that it makes him behave in shitty, unacceptable ways, I'm like, yeah, man, I get that. I went through that. And so
it's funny for me, if I'm thinking about his particular specific type of relationship with a Trill, let's say.
Yeah.
I think I'm not as jealous like that, but for me it would be the marrying the idea that they are legion of people, right? Like that the collective known as
Right, you're marrying a room full of people, essentially.
Yeah. And so that brings with it a lot of like stuff to work through, and I think that's probably where I would be more challenged than just like he banged Vanessa Williams.
Yeah, well, but you want to know what I thought was interesting here, and it's going to happen a couple of times in this episode, that he is clearly jealous of Dax's relationship with Vanessa Williams' character here, multiple times throughout this. However, we get no indications that he's in any way uncomfortable with the distinct bisexual energy between Dax and Miranda here. Mm-hmm. It's just run-of-the-mill jealousy, and I think that is the not weirdly, but that is a progressive part of the story that's very subtle.
Well, there's so much of that.
Important.
The best parts of this and Trek and this episode is there's so much just radical for the time accessibility to alternative relationships and ideas of sexuality and ideas of traditional relationships. Like, just, we'll get to it, but the way that it's okay to just like break up with somebody and like have it be cool and go and that's not looked upon as this deep dark thing that they're breaking up and it's that not everything has to be the way it's so heteronormative and the way it was prescribed to us when we were growing up, and I love that about it, but they just butted up against this sort of, and even the big bad who comes in and this like and maybe there's a lens we could find it where they are actually holding up traditional values to this more sort of liberal lifestyle accepting lifestyle, just to show how ridiculous it is. If I was to give it a lot of credit,
I think that is what the attempt is.
Mm-hmm. Which you have to applaud that.
No, of course, and I think it's great. I think there are ways that what they did was pretty progressive, ways in which they would have been able to go much further today. It shows a wide range, or at least alludes to a wide range of things here. So we'll get there.
But doesn't looking at that, so while we're here, doesn't it looking at that like mulch pile in the foreground remind you of being a kid, like at the playground?
Oh, we didn't mulch in Vermont.
Oh,
it was like, here's some gravel.
No, okay. Well, there you go.
80s in Vermont, like here's some dirt, here's some gravel. There might be some grass, might not be. Suck it up.
I've had it.
That's what we did. So, unfortunately, Worf continues to be super judgmental and controlling. But then, Worf runs into Ralph Reed from the 1990s religious right. If you're an old political nerd, you're gonna know who Ralph Reed is. If not, most of you probably won't. Anyway, he wants to shut down this sex planet for its gluttony. So later, Worf is still in uniform and is reading a pamphlet from this guy to Dax's annoyance. And so I forget who said it, but I think the idea here on this planet is that there is always a giant bisexual orgy just off screen throughout all of this. And so otherwise, none of this really makes sense. Especially from Worf's point of view, if that's not sort of what's actually happening. And that is what they talk about it, we just can't see it.
And it's probably outside, right? Because like it's so important that we're outside in the nice weather.
I mean, part of it, yeah. Although Terry Farrell burns terribly in the sun, so she was very uncomfortable. So, anyway, meanwhile, Lita is doing some hardcore hand-holding in weird circles with a dude in a mesh shirt. It's both sort of sexy, but profoundly unsexy at the same time. It's like, are you finished? Are you done? Are you getting off from this?
There's a corner of the internet that's just a Google away that is into this, so.
Look, and no shame. If that's what's doing it for you, but I'm not exactly sure biologically what this is doing for either.
And once again, here's another, whatever she's getting from it. What's awesome about this scene, in a way, I'm gonna keep digging for the gold, Keith, is when Dax and Worf enter. No shame. Right? Go ahead, watch. It's cool, whatever. I ain't got nothing to be ashamed of or embarrassed about. She's just into it.
Right. Well, the only person here who feels this is Worf and the, whatever the bad guys are. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Worf and Dax enter, and of course, Worf is super judgy. Dax points out correctly that this is none of your business.
Hold on, though.
Yeah.
Just to foreshadow it be coming up, because we're doing a lot of digging for the good here, but also
kind of like picking your nose. We're digging for gold.
Yeah, but also, like, I don't care how much you love your partner, right? If the worst parts of you are like Indiana Jones come out when you see snakes, then it'd be one thing to be like, okay, we're going to the zoo, we're going to go to the reptile exhibit, like, you need to be cool with that, and you kind of prepare yourself for it. But that's different than being like, okay, we're going to a snake sanctuary and we're going to be buried neck deep in snakes. Are you cool with that? I feel like Worf put himself in a bad spot here, right? Like, we should not have agreed to this.
Well, 100%. 100%. Like, clearly Worf has some work to do, right? Like, Worf needs to sit down and as we find out later, there are reasons why he feels the way that he feels. And this is where I'm again sort of giving away what my feeling on this. And like, the behavior that he displays here, the way he treats Dax, the way he does all of this is indefensible, right? It's not okay. It is wrong. To be trying to be controlling your partner, to be judgmental in this way, like, it's wrong. It's unacceptable. Full stop. And at the same time, the trauma that he's dealing with, that is causing all of these this behavior, is real.
Mm-hmm.
So that I don't think it makes him a bad person. I think it makes him a person not dealing well with his trauma. And it's something that a lot of people face in a lot of ways. And he's behaving in a way that you see every day, right? From a lot of different people. So we'll get into it, but I think it's that part of it I think is very interesting about this episode, and I wish we just handled it a little better. Anyway, what Dax wants to do is like, leave him alone. I want to sign out a couple of floaters, which I'm assuming in 1996 wasn't a euphemism as it is today.
No.
Let's go ride some floaters.
Mm-hmm. That was awesome, though. Made me laugh.
But Worf wants to go to the Essentialists meeting, Essentialists being the bad guys here, on the beach where everyone is dressed head to toe in fully body-covering Speedos. So on this orgy planet, there are no two-piece bikinis, let alone everything is a one-piece suit, which is very interesting considering go back to season 1 of Next Generation, and it's a whole different ballgame. In fact, go to the original series. It is so odd, even I get it's the 90s or whatever, but it is odd how unbelievably chaste everything is on this episode, more so than is even necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't understand what happened there with this. Like, why are there not even a bathing suit like you'd actually see on the beach?
Do you think that hold on, let's put ourselves there in production, right? Do you think that if our message is that we want to show these fundamentalists as being the bads, right? Then right. What if we go too far visually for the audience at the time, do we side too many people with them, being like, it is too scandalous, it is too, you know what I mean? Like, probably not a Trek audience, but I mean, I'm just trying to come up with maybe a thought.
Yeah, I see that. It makes them all the more unreasonable.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that bad, right?
I agree with you. I think you have a point there, but it also undercuts the concept of
Ryza.
Like you're talking about something that it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm like, you gotta be like, oh, Keith, oh my God, you're really in your birthday suit. You're so revealing there with your hoodie. Like, oh my God, like, put some clothes on. Like, what are you talking about?
It does, yes, it does make it more, because we're we're already doing so much heavy lifting, inferring so much about what's happening on Ryza, that the few chances we have to indicate it visually, we might as well do that.
Yeah. So while I talk next, Mike, just for your edification, because nobody else needs it, go and search screenshots of the Next Generation episode Justice, the first season episode of Justice, and like, it is astounding we didn't see any testicles. And like, yeah, like that's what Ryza is supposed to be.
Oh, Mal. Oh.
Yeah. Right?
Okay, Deanna Troy.
Well,
she's not. No, she's just like close to some naked men in a couple of these shots here.
Yeah, and like,
oh my god,
we did that 9 years before. Yeah, exactly. Like,
hold on a second.
I think we might have had regrets.
That guy's like. That guy's furiously scrubbing his IMDb currently.
Oh my god, it's like Trump's diaper.
That's on the first page of results.
Yeah, so putting that in context, right? It's like, if this existed on Star Trek 9 years before, we only have one-piece bathing suits for everybody? Like, what is happening in this episode?
Oh man, I'm having a treat over here.
Well, okay. I mean, point made, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm gonna just keep the search result up. That's cool.
Mike, do you need 10 minutes? Gonna come back with a sandwich.
Great episode.
Yeah, that was great.
Justice was great.
Wow. Anyway,
okay, but yeah, point made. Good.
Point made.
What do you guys think? Why do you think that choice was made?
What happened here? It's very strange. All right. They show up at the Essentialist meeting, where apparently a big crowd has grown because, like, if I'm gonna go on vacation to a sex planet to go just bang everything that moves, I'm gonna stop and go and listen to the guy judging us all. It's kind of like when you go to the timeshare meeting. Like,
I was just gonna say that my honeymoon, right? Like, they were really smart because you couldn't get the Wi-Fi password unless you went to the timeshare meeting.
You're shitting me.
And we were in the middle of Mexico, and I needed to check my shit, so we went.
So as opposed to giving you like a golf bag, they said you can't have.
Well, you could buy the Wi-Fi for like $150 for the week or whatever, or you could go to the timeshare meeting. And I was like, well, let's just go to that. It was my first timeshare meeting, and I learned a lot.
So everybody here went to the timeshare meeting for no reason, and all he did was call them like bad
perverts.
Yeah, a bunch of pervos in their like bathing suits that covered more than my outfit right now. So, anyway.
Apparently in the 90s, they did have bronzer, though, as
big
evidence.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're ready to wrestle that night. So they run into Bashir, who is making out with a Ryzian, who is not Lita, and Orandus comes up to them and points out how silly these Essentialists are. She says Fullerton and his Essentialists have been here for almost a month, and no matter how many speeches he gives, the water is still warm and the wind still smells sweet. But if he's enjoying himself, who are we to discourage him? Which I think is, again, one of the super progressive concepts of this planet. It is like, hey, whatever gets you off, come do it. And I think like that's a really good way of putting it. But then dollar store Pat Robertson comes up and gives a speech calling them pampered, spoiled children. He says their hedonistic lifestyle leaves them vulnerable to the Borg or the Dominion. It's kind of a weak tea debate and a mixed message, because is this a moral judgment or their hedonism? Or is he calling them soft because they're not preparing for war? And like, what would they do? Be running phaser drills, these civilians? I don't quite know what they mean. But Worf, of course, is super on board. And he points out that the Klingons still want to take over the Federation because they're soft. And Bashir says, yeah, but none of that has anything to do with Ryza. And Dax says, all I know is I've spent lifetimes defending the Federation, and I deserve a vacation now and then. Fair point. Then Lita comes in and tells Bashir she's having a great time. They're both very happy. And Worf says they dishonor themselves with their actions. At which point Bashir and Lita explain that they're breaking up. And this is part of a Bajoran ritual, the breakup sex vacation. And, which I think, sure.
Cool.
But at no point do they address that, and this is where, like, Dax of today would be like, maybe they have an open relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, there it is. But, like, I think that's the missing part of all of this. And perhaps we just didn't conceive of open relationships in 1996. Like, why not? But that would have been too scandalous, I think.
Yeah, but it's also okay to be like, maybe we're, like, I think the point that you can that at least that holds up for the most part is that, like, everybody's different. Who gives a shit? It ain't your business.
Well, no, exactly. And I think that is the other part of Worf's sort of duty and, like, you owe me this, whatever. Is like, well, have we agreed to that?
Yeah, that's that. And once again, spoiler, we'll talk about it more, but I'll let you continue. But, like, it's not even Worf that bothers me, to be honest with you. It's that I can't marry that Dax would have agreed, would have just been in this relationship.
Well, I think this is where there's dissension among the fans. And I'm really curious, folks out there who are smarter than us, what is your take on all of this? Because I think that there's the people who come down on the side of, well, this is a perfect example of sort of an emotionally abusive relationship with a controlling person, and then Dax is sort of, the character is left out to lunch by, like, going along with it and going, oh, well, I stand by my man or whatever, and I get it. And the other,
she's never portrayed as, and the performance from Terry is never that as a victim. I don't see her as being controlled by anybody. It's more she's just tolerating it. That's where my bugaboo is. I do not think she comes off as abused. She comes off as even being verbally abused. She gets frustrated with him, but I think at all times, in my opinion, it feels like she is in control. Because at any moment she'd be like, go F yourself and walk away. She Dax, right? I think she is trying to lead him to water and thinks that she sees that it is being caused by something rooted in, and wants to get to a healing place with him. It's just funny to me that this is, because it also seems like they've established that this has been going on for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So is this the first time she's seeing this color, maybe? I don't know. I can't marry that part, but...
I agree with... I think I come down on your side. I come down on the side of, this is a 300-year-old person who has been through every type of relationship in the world, and is the one in control, and she's exerting the control not by fighting, but by sort of, like, nudging, and she's doing judo as opposed to attacking him, which is how I'm looking at it from 2024 lenses. In 1996, I think the context of that changes, and behaving in a way that was tolerating this and not fighting back and not sort of holding him accountable for it was what was expected from a lot of people in a relationship like this. So maybe the context of it is different in 1996, whereas today, like, we all have a little bit more agency, and maybe we're perceiving her as having more agency and more control in the situation because of 2024 lenses. It's hard to say.
That's a really great point. And I think on top of that, how much greater would the representation for little girls and women in relationships have been then, to see a woman actually take, not, like, we are, like you said, I'm interpreting her sort of aloofness as her comfort and her control, whereas perhaps it would have been better at the time for the story for her to have been like, you know what, buddy, and kick him to the curb, just to show that you don't have to tolerate that. So maybe, but then what do you do to that character Worf at that point?
Well, I think, and again, we're jumping to the end, but whatever, it's not a good episode. When we find out that he's behaving this way because of trauma, and I find that Very understandable. I think that is true of a lot of people in the situation. And again, cutting to the end for myself, I've dealt with this myself, right? I have been this guy, and it was caused by trauma and fear and anxiety, and I had to change. I had to become, to do the work on myself to become a better, more evolved person that treated other people and myself better than I was doing it then. And so I had to be accountable, even though was understandable how I got there, right? I was sort of raised by that. And like I had to sort of deprogram a lot in myself to rise above that. But I had to be accountable for it.
You're right, because otherwise it's an excuse.
And what's missing in this episode, because we get the explanation, we empathize with him. We like, okay, I see why you're this way. I get it. You're not a bad person. You went through some shit, and now you don't. You have work to do. You have healing to do. But what's missing is the accountability part. And I think what would have helped this is Dax being like, okay, I hear you. I get it. Like it is an understandable reaction to what you went through. And I love you, but you got to pull your shit together, and you need to change your behavior and do the work on yourself to not be to have this type of behavior.
I agree with you, and I think that's the biggest swing and miss, because instead what we get is the tropey, well, he turns against the baddies at the end, and so that means his arc is complete.
Yeah, and we find out why he's like this. Okay, that's really important, but then what? Then how do you stop doing this is really what's missing here.
You're still gonna have to explain it to me. Like, I get the trauma, right? But how is the trauma of that judgment manifesting? I guess trauma does trauma, right? Like, how's that manifesting in his being jealous of other boys, or other partners?
Well, I mean, I can sort of only speak for myself, but like trauma to me frequently. A lot of it causes a lot of different things, and some of it is opposition, but at least for me it manifested in rigidity. It was like
forced control.
It was like I had this trauma, and what is the most traumatic part of trauma is realizing that you have no control. You lose autonomy, whether it's body autonomy, whether it's experience, whatever it is, and so you're desperately searching to feel safe again, and usually that comes out in control. And then the flavor of what you are trying to over control in order to feel safe again can come out in a lot of different ways, and part of that comes down to your experience or your upbringing, and sometimes it's subconscious extrapolation. Like, I had stuff that I realized that I was trying to control with genuine fear and literal panic attacks, trying to control something that, looking back on it, I have no idea why I even cared. It had nothing to do with anything, but trauma, if you don't face it directly, it spiders out. It's like a cancer, and it causes you to behave and feel and react to things in ways that don't quite make any sense. And so just the desperation for a sense of control, and like that smell triggers something that reminds me of something, so obviously that smell is bad, so anything that makes that smell is bad. Anyone who likes that smell is bad. I have to cut all of that out of my life so as not to be triggered by that smell, or whatever that is. And so I think that's what's happening here. So it doesn't make any sense. Of course it doesn't make any sense.
You know what, the most unwittingly best analogy we've done is that you just gave a really, I think, incisive, insightful exploration of trauma and how it can manifest whilst wearing a dunce birthday hat visually. And that's kind of what this episode's trying to do.
That is kind of true.
You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I get all that, and I get the soccer story, and I get all, but at that point, when we get to it, so much other ridiculous stuff has taken place that it's like, it's sort of lost,
Yeah, exactly. So, and thus is sort of my interest and revulsion to this episode. Let us continue. Good Lord. So Bashir and Brecken are breaking up. Then the essentialist Bolian comes in with a phaser, and they start sort of breaking stuff. And in Act 3, discount
knowing
Benny
that they had to do a couple of takes, probably.
Oh, it's so stupid. Discount Benny Hinn comes in and says, "We got you! We knocked over a couple of Horgons and rearranged the furniture. So that proves that you aren't prepared for the Gem Hadar."
Yeah,
wow,
they basically shut down Mr. Toad's Wild Ride for like half hour at Disney.
Let me tell you, they did the exact same thing that Charlie, my cat, does all the time.
Yeah, when they stare at you.
You're not ready for the Gem Hadar. You're not ready!
Now feed me, bitch.
Yes, exactly. It's like, we're gonna take these couch cushions and unruffle them. So stupid.
Even Dax is like, yeah, what are you doing? What?
What? The phasers were fake. The whole thing was nerfed as bad as the sex is nerfed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? Is this like a prank? What's happening? So later, Worf is still brooding, and he wants to talk to Dax about her behavior, and he lays down a bunch of judgment. But he gets to the point. "Jadzia, you're my Parmakai, and that means everything you do reflects on me." Which is, I mean, awful, but also like what a lot of people go through. And a lot of parents feel that way about their kids. A lot of people feel that about their partners, and it's unhealthy. Dax says, "Worf, I'm not going to change who I am." Worf says, "Nor am I." She says, "Well, at least we agree on something." The next morning, Dax compliments Arandis on the Ryzian's industrious ability to put the couch cushions back together in less than 10 hours. Again, like, the danger is so unbelievably nerfed.
We're still talking about it. I still can't tell you what they were trying to do. I don't quite get what they were doing.
Well, it's because they didn't, like I said, it's all like, is this a moral judgment? Or is this you're not prepped for the war? Like, it was a mixture of the two, meaning it was nothing.
Mm.
So Arandis can tell that Dax is upset. And Dax says, "I never knew a Klingon who had a tougher time enjoying himself." And Arandis says, "There's no reason for you not to have a good time. Risa is famous for its diversions." Now, in the stage directions on the screenplay, we have here Arandis glances towards an attractive and half-naked Ryzian man who's helping clean up the solarium. However, Renee made the choice to not put the glance in. So we never see the guy that she's referring to in the stage direction making this offer to be much more about Arandis than this random dude. So once again, subtly leaning Dax in a queer direction. And I think it's good direction from Renee. Because I think that it's where we're headed anyway. I think it's much better. So later, we see Bashir and Lita's breakup ceremony. Quark is annoyed that there wasn't any fireworks or fighting, but then we get the big reveal. Lita broke up with Bashir because she's got the hots for Rom. Woo, Rom!
We knew it was coming. They foreshadowed it a little bit, but it was awesome to see. But maybe
fantastic.
I think it's the best part of the episode.
Oh, well, yeah, because that's the part of the story that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actually rooting for and happy about, because nothing else here are we rooting for or happy about.
And so and it's so funny, in an episode where we're showing the other thing, Bashir's response is like pretty rad. He's just like, cool, good for Rom.
It was a little envious.
He's a little salty, but I mean, like, okay.
But yeah, and I know it's great. Good for Rom. Way to go. Then Worf runs into Dax and Arandis, who are doing full Ghost clay wheel, and he, of course, loses his shit.
Was that an indication of it? Like, when was Ghost?
Ghost is before this. Yeah, I think it was definitely a reference to Ghost.
Oh yeah, it was 90. Okay.
Yeah.
It was
we were clearly ghosting here. Worf, it freaks the heck out. And he leaves, and Citizen Kane's a Horgon back in their room.
Time out real quick, just to go back to that beat. Yeah. I mean, I love Ghost. I actually really love that movie. But, like, isn't it... rad think that it's so hard to predict scenes in movies or television or properties that will become culturally iconic and relevant, to the fact where it's now a shortcut for a whole idea. You don't have to say anything, if do anything. It's just them doing pottery together shortcuts a whole beat. It's pretty awesome.
Right. Yeah, and you never know if the scene is gonna matter, if the movie is gonna matter, if the scene is gonna exist outside of the context of the movie. Art. That's the exciting part about art. And when Mike's the Bang on His Grandma song ends up on a ringtone, it's just like you never know what's really gonna come out there.
It's like Carrie is such a great book, but no one remembers anything from it except for the scene where the blood comes. Thanks, honey.
I love Carrie.
Oh, it's great. I mean, the book is much better than the movie, but that scene is what...
Piper Laurie's performance is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, for 100%.
Anyway, meanwhile, Discount Joel Osteen wants to escalate their terrifying acts of G-rated terrorism with the help of Worf. So, back in the lobby, Dax, Bashir, and Quark discuss Worf's acting like an asshole, and Bashir is understandably baffled why Dax still wants him. But then we find out the horrible, diabolical plot of the Essentialists. They're gonna really show them how scary they are by making it rain! I think this was an episode of Paw Patrol once. It's
still
chaos!
I do not get it. I still don't get it.
Yeah, it's so bad. It's chaos and horror because of the moisture. And it's, how long is it gonna rain, Mike?
Days.
3 days!
Worf is so competent. Even he... Well, to be fair, at least Worf is coming from a place of, I'm just a petulant child. These other guys think they're doing something.
It's like... Oh, I mean, it really is sort of like Minions, or what's the Gru?
Yeah.
That's basically what this is.
It's that, I guess, the kind of... I was thinking it's more like Inspector Gadget. It's like, go, Gadget, rain.
Well, that too, yeah. And Worf announces that I'm behind the rain. And later, much suffering continues.
Now, Keith, it's interesting because most people, not all, most people would prefer their butt plugs wet.
I just quit, is what happened there.
Let's get through this. Happy birthday, buddy. Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday to me. So, anyway, so on the show, we've gone from realistic, just heart-wrenching wartime trauma to too much humidity and indoor hoverball. Oh, how are we going to get through it?
And another best scene, I think, for me is Shimmerman here. He knows he's in a schlocky shitfest, and he knows that this whole premise is stupid, and so he decides you could go one way, or you could just triple down, and we know we can trust him to do so. This scene from Quark is perfect.
The only way you can do it, you have to lean in. That's the only way. It's like skiing, right? You can't sort of try not to fall. You have to actually commit to skiing. Otherwise, you're gonna.
I can't ski, so analogy lost on me, but I'm with you.
That's all right. So Worf and the supervillains celebrate a 30% decline in guests, and definitely a diminished Yelp rating. And Worf leaves, and Discount Ted Cruz has a plan to escalate further. Perhaps by switching all the coffee to decaf or something. Truly diabolical.
Also, like, from Worf's perspective, and I'm sorry, I know this might sound crass, but I mean, coming from where we just came, I don't think it could be any worse.
We crossed that bridge.
Yeah. Like, isn't most relationship directive get more sex? Right? Like, I feel like his behavior and his trajectory here is, like, to get less sex for himself.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, and that is a little bit weird. Like, his discomfort with sex would make you wonder if there was sexual trauma in his life.
Which is not what is indicated.
Because, like, based on the trauma that he would have, he would be and again, trauma's complex, right? But like based on what he went through, he would be afraid to be fighting with Dax.
Right.
And all their Batleth battles, he would be afraid of violence.
Yeah, like I don't want to diminish trauma. Clearly that is not our indication. But for me, trying to tell a story in 50 minutes, the trauma he outlines, whilst traumatic, I mean, to be a kid and to have that experience is crazy, but
Just
it
unbelievable.
doesn't seem married to the conflict presented in the episode. That's where I can't.
And I agree, and with the caveat that trauma is wildly complex and it shows up in lots of weird different ways, but the type of...
But when trying to tell a story in 45 minutes...
It doesn't quite track, like, and again, like, how do you tell the story of Worf going through sexual trauma, right? You can't really, but you just can't, I mean, look, I think everybody, including the people who worked on the show, like pretend it's not canon.
But like what they outline for him, like his trauma, his experience in the soccer match, seems like it would marry much better in an episode where he's supposed to fight for Dax's honor, but can't bring himself against a human, but can't bring himself to that battle because he's scarred from having killed some kid.
He should be terrified of fighting anything but Klingons because he's afraid he's going to break them. Like that's the story, and that would make perfect sense.
Yeah.
And it would also, canon-wise, explain why every time he fights on Next Generation, he gets his ass kicked. So, because he's pulling his punches. I don't know, like, that's a more interesting story. But that's not what we're doing here.
Well, speaking of the soccer story, here we go.
Yeah, let's get to it. So, in Act 4, Dax finally calls Worf on his petulant behavior. Says, what you did had nothing to do with Risa, the Essentialists, or the Federation. It was about me. You give yourself far too much credit. Oof. Do I? You think I'm irresponsible, frivolous, that I care more about pleasure than I do about commitment. Worf says a Klingon woman would never give me grounds for suspicion. How would you know? Curzon spent more time around the Klingons than you ever did.
Sick burn.
And Worf says you may have lived among my people, but you are not a Klingon. I am. Maybe so. But you're not like any Klingon I've ever met. See, all of that is more interesting. And I had another thought, but it's gone. I've had too many thoughts already today. But Dax says, what happened to you, Worf? You're a paragon of Klingon honor and discipline, but when it comes to the Klingon passion for life, the exuberance, the enjoyment of the moment, you're constantly holding yourself back. Why? And this is something that has been true of Worf from the very beginning. And we've asked this question before.
But here's the thing, like, for me, a newer viewer of Trek, and of which there are others. I'm not the only person who ever watched Deep Space Nine without having watched TNG, right? Like, there were other people.
Yeah.
I feel like this would have been just a great place to just reiterate Worf's journey. As you've told, many of our patrons and people on YouTube have told me from the watch along, they had to reintroduce me to the Klingon adoption story because I had forgotten if it had even been broached before. Right. I'd forgotten, and so I needed that context for why he was even playing soccer. I was like, why do they play soccer on Klingon? This would have been a perfect time for just Worf to retell Worf's story. I think it still tracks with a lot of what he said. I didn't know that I needed this huge trauma thing, but anyway.
Yeah, well, and you know what? The mixed messaging is what's happening over there.
I don't know, Jed's just bringing me stuff. We've talked about this before, folks, but CEO Jen is just she's holding me together with popsicle sticks, rubber bands, and gummy bears. I don't know how it's happening.
No doubt. Yeah, you don't deserve her.
No.
Anyway, so talk about the mixed messaging, right? From the the essentialists, right? Is it an allegory for sort of like fundamentalist, conservative, religious judgment of the behavior, that sort of a thing? Or is it about like you're not seeing the threat and you're sort of like soft because you're not, you're not training for war? Same thing with Worf here, right? Because like he's trying to control her and judging her body count or her behavior, whatever, which is much more of like a conservative religious sort of a judgment deal. But that's, again, it's not really what it's all about. So we've mixed messaging with both, and so it's really messy and confusing. So anyway, so he tells the story of a traumatic childhood story where he was playing soccer, and because he was a Klingon playing against a human, he accidentally literally killed a boy in a soccer game, which in this episode, which has been so nerfed and stupid, right? Everything in this episode is completely nerfed. The essentialists are like knocking over cushions. Mm-hmm. Everyone's wearing like a like, look at her. She's wearing like a one-piece bathing suit with a robe over it. Like, you can barely see ankles and neck. It's like Victorian. And then he literally killed a kid?
Yeah, I didn't even notice in the time. I think that sort of the wild ends of the spectrum of that is another reason why it felt like, what?
Yeah, which I much prefer like this. Like, okay, like that's mm-hmm. real. That finally starts to explain what's going on, even though it doesn't track.
Although it is funny because I remember seeing Alexander in The Next Gen, and I'm like, that kid couldn't have killed anybody. No. Well, I guess their heads are hard, so if you like...
Worf's discomfort with Alexander not being a fighter... This episode, we're gonna, at the end, I think we're all going to agree together to select all and delete this episode.
Yeah, if that's an option, I'm in.
Yeah. Anyway, Dax says it was an accident. Worf says, which only makes it worse. Compared to Klingons, humans are fragile creatures.
You know, I think I would want to be... Sorry, Keith, I'm cutting you off at the balls right here, but...
Yeah, you sure are.
I think I would want to be a Bolian. They're the coolest to me.
They have a really cool, distinct look.
Like, if I had a walk-on, I'd be like, could I be a Bolian?
A lot of makeup time, but yeah.
Yeah, but
cool.
You get extra time on set then.
That's true. If you're only doing it once. Worf says, I realized in that moment that to live amongst them, I would have to practice restraint. But it's weird, his restraint is about sex, not about violence. But whatever. Dax says that must have been difficult for you. He says at first, but in time it became part of who I am. And you're still afraid that if you lose control, someone I care about might get hurt. Again, why is he hung up on sex if it's about violence? Whatever. Dax says that explains a lot. But you have to realize there are some things in life that you can't control. And one of them is me. But what you can do is trust me. I care about you, Worf, and I would never do anything to hurt you. And so, at the end, Dax is telling him the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, the next piece of that is, you can't control me, and if you try, I'm out of here.
Yes, that is missing.
But you can trust me, and you need to learn how to trust me, because I have done nothing that is untrustworthy. Because, Worf's got some work to do. Right, we're still doing this. There's an earthquake, and the Essentialists have messed with the tectonic regulator. So Worf and Dax, they go and they beat up Discount Mike Johnson and take back the controls, whatever. All is well, and the next day everybody is heading for home, but not before Dax and Worf go skinny dipping. And that is, I think on word count, more time than anybody has ever spent on this episode. What do you say we spend some more?
Hold on, I have a few more pictures. Let's cycle them because I did them. Yep, that happens.
Yeah, the earthquakes. Don't do the earthquake. I lose my mind.
Oh, wait, hold on. We're on the beach, and Vanessa Williams, I think, is like saying, I'll bang you later.
Yeah. Make sure you have your wrap on.
Okay, and Tatooine.
Tatooine. There we go. AlamarEmmys, count to 4. AlamarEmmys, then one more. AlamarEmmys, it's AlamarEmmys time. Okay, Mike. Oh. Why has the Lord of Death showed up on our...
Okay, the first two setups, we had I was giving you nice birthday wishes. And then this one is
By blowing a Horgon?
This one is to remind you that the Grim Reaper your time is running through the...
Do I have to choke on a Horgon the entire time? I mean, look, hey, no shade on whatever you're into, but I don't think I consented to this.
Look, I'll at least make it smaller.
Oh, thank you. If not, I'm not even I'm gonna stop right there.
Let's go ahead. Look, there are wormholes everywhere. There are logic wormholes everywhere, there are relationship wormholes everywhere, but let's talk about what's most important. Why do they all have to get on the same runabout together? Like, aren't there a lot of runabouts?
All of this episode, that's the issue. Runabout.
Well, the whole setup is like a fun...
The airport shuttle?
You said it. The whole setup is like a... Cool, everybody wants to go to the banging planet, right? I get it. But, like, why do we all gotta go together?
I mean, like, how much fun... But, like, that's the fun episode. The fun episode is, like... You go to an orgy planet with all of your coworkers, and it's weird, and you realize like what all of your coworkers are into.
Yeah, it's like the Christmas party. It's like the one time a year everybody gets wasted, and like people you don't usually interact with socially, or you're interacting with socially. It's weird,
right? And like if you see all the weird, dirty stuff they're into, and like because there's like no doors, there's no anything like on this planet. It's just like it's all right there in the open, which is great. But you're like, oh hey, that's that guy from accounting doing something, whatever, fill in the blank. That would be fun.
I've had 2 office Christmas parties that have led to direct firings. Twice.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't tell any of those stories, but
I've never had an office Christmas party.
No. Okay.
Just all by myself here in the basement.
I think the episode itself is a wormhole, so I don't know that it warrants much more discussion.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, like, we said all of that. I mean, it's just the wormholes are just in the...
Plot?
The plot and the motivations. And, like, it's the motivations. Like, what... It's not even, like, what is the episode trying to say? Because that's hard. Sometimes it gets lost. But none of the characters within the episode have any... resemblance of coherence to the points that they're trying to make. And I think that's
all right. Bright spots. Quark just being like, I'm gonna just Quark. He's playing Gilligan. He's playing just Gilligan in this episode, and he's excellent at it.
He knows what the planet's for.
Yeah.
And he's gonna do it.
And I think it reinforces, as silly as it is, it reinforces the whole, what I thought is the takeaway from this episode that I like for Trek, the representation of just like, it's okay to look at sex and sexuality as fun and play without having to like overthink it or marry it to a relationship or marry it to any sort of traditional sense of what it's supposed to be. That is the fun juxtaposition of this episode, right? The fundamentalists, and then versus like, it's okay to just like, anytime enjoyed, what's the old saying? I'm going to bastardize it, but like a moment enjoyed is never wasted. And I think that's kind of a fun one, to use sex as the surrogate for play, right? Whereas, you know, I love playing video games, and you could be like, well, Mike, there's, you know, war happening and such. It's silly that you waste your time playing video games. And yes, that is always a contradiction of life and in humanity, right? Why can some people watch a whole movie where people are being murdered all over it, but then when an animal gets injured in that movie, that's what affects them, right? That's
where I draw the line.
Yeah, human nature is weird, right?
Right, yeah.
That could have been a cool thing to focus on, but since we never focus on that, for me, the best moment is just like Quark staying in the one episode and just making it work.
Yeah. No, you know, for me, the best part of this episode was continuing to define Dax's queerness.
Yeah.
And being open about it, and everybody's radical acceptance, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
As exactly as it should, and I think it's great. And so that's the cool part of this episode. I also like the beat forward of for Rom. Mm-hmm. For Rom and Lita. I'm really rooting
Rom.
for that.
Yeah, 100%.
Like rooting for Rom, rooting for that relationship. It's great for both of them, for both Lita and for Rom. We don't know Lita particularly well yet, but Lita deserves somebody like Rom, and Rom deserves somebody like Lita, and I'm happy for both of them. Yeah, so those are my best moments. Let's hand out
The stem bolt.
The stem bolt.
You get some stem bolts. Hell yeah, they are self-sealing. Here are some stem bolts for you.
Okay, Mikey, what you got?
You know, there are the threads of potential episodes, or at least you can get it. What almost hurts the episode more is that there's enough breadcrumbs to what might have been the point that you can see how badly it failed at making the point. I mean, the biggest offenders for me is, and I actually don't agree with a lot of the discourse that you alluded to about how the biggest failing is that they allow Dax to be in this abusive relationship. It doesn't feel aggressive to me. I mean, he does seem like a petulant baby, but I don't see it as abusive particularly. Now, I don't want to suck the life out of anybody who feels that way, obviously. It's just I didn't interpret it that way. I'm not saying it makes sense, right? I'm just saying I didn't view it that way. For me, the bigger offender is just that we could have made a point, right? Like, but in not making a point, you completely, like you said, everything is nerfed, and so it just nothing makes sense. I don't. And then and the weather thing, I don't get it. The bad guys, the fact that, is your point that we're in an ongoing war. But I just don't get it. I guess is the end of the day is what it is, and it's just terrible. It's pretty bad. Talking about it reminds me how bad it is. And I think there's an episode here that could be about, like, de-emphasizing our obsession about sex and its traditional nature and how it's supposed to be, and embracing queerness and embracing non-traditional sex roles or embracing any of that. But we kind of get away from all of that by not going there and not, you know, they're like we talk about, sometimes the best representation is in just allowing it to be and in radical acceptance and showing that. But sometimes you need to indicate it a little bit more. And I feel like we didn't do any of those things, really. So ultimately, it's pretty poor. The performances are pretty good. I mean, and even Worf's monologue where he goes through his trauma, I think is well done and effective. Isolated in a scene, right? In the grand scheme, it doesn't quite work. But I'm not gonna like give it a 0 or anything like that. I would say that it is sub 50 for sure. Compared to just like the other stuff we've seen, it's hard for me to give it more than 25 self-sealing stem bolts.
Yeah, I'm going back to look at what did we give Meridian?
Which one was that?
That was the one where Dax fell in love with the guy on the planet, shifting back and forth.
Yes, it was. She does have a penchant for a loser, doesn't she?
Oof. Maybe there's hope, says the single guy. I could be a boring, bland, or an asshole, and maybe there's a chance. So, all right. So what? Sorry, what'd you say? 20 something?
25.
25.
That's
all
a
right,
quarter though, so I'm gonna say 24. I'm gonna give it just less.
24. Yeah, boy. I think
it's
I've
not
said
egregious.
Yeah, I mean, it is an episode. It has a beginning, middle, and end.
Keith, hold on to let me put a final point on it. It's not Sex, Lies, and Monkeys.
It's
almost exactly that. Actually, remember? Do you know what I'm referring to?
Oh yes. Oh God, from The Practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's no sex, no lies, and Quark.
There was an episode of David E. Kelly's The Practice, Sex, Lies, and Monkeys, which I think we ultimately ranked as our worst episode.
Well, that one was just offensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm not going to say a heck of a lot, but I think what you said about there are seeds here for a real episode, right? You want to face Worf's rigidity and his judgment and his controllingness, which we've seen plenty before. You want to like face that down and actually come to a head with that. Great. You want to do a hijinks, the coworker hijinks on the sex planet? Great. Love that. Let's do that. Do you want to do a sort of a take on fundamentalist religious right, especially in the 90s? That was everything. Versus free expression of sexuality? Great. I like that episode too. Right? Those are three decent episodes you could do here. But this is none of those things. It's a big mess. Everybody knows it's a big mess. People are going to have lots of different interpretations about like how bad the Worf Dax relationship is here, and I think that's all valid. I have some empathy for Worf, but that is not it is not absent accountability for his bad behavior. I think that I think there is some really interesting stuff here. It's certainly, I'll say this, the Worf trauma and his shitty behavior caused me to continue to reflect on myself and my own behavior and my own trauma and all that kind of stuff. I identified with Worf in ways that I wish that I didn't, but I did. And now, hopefully, being through that, I can look at it very differently. So I thought that part of that episode was personally interesting and personally intriguing and landed personally, but I'm not sure it exists as an episode of television successfully like that. Now,
though, I have to just to like, I want to put a point on this. I know you've brought up accountability a bunch of times, but like, it's not lost on me how 90s it is to give the trauma to the male, right? And to excuse his bullshit behavior.
So he can do whatever he wants
because he had trauma, right? And they do play it that way, which does suck.
For sure.
Does suck.
Yeah, no, he is let completely off the hook, and
especially since they allow all the other characters to comment on what a bastard he's being.
Right, and that is the.
I think the biggest failure.
First, and that, I mean, God, you really want to get into it? All right, let's fucking get into it. So the first half of therapy is figuring out why. Mm-hmm. The second half is figuring out how to then be accountable for your behavior and how to change and how to whatever. And I think in the 90s and a lot of, whether it was the 90s or whether it's just the sort of like the concept of therapy that we all understand, is that therapy ends the day you're like, oh my God, it was this. Right. The horse kicked my little brother. Fade to credits. That is the end of therapy. Right? As if like that's going to magic. And it's missing the, okay, there's our starting point. Now let's fix all of the maladaptive thoughts and behaviors that have resulted from that, including being accountable for all of those the ways that those maladaptive thoughts and behaviors have affected other people.
I often believe in talking to mostly, not individuals, but mostly couples, right? Who are like, one partner will be like, oh, well, if we could just go to couples therapy, that would be the fix. And the other part, but so-and-so doesn't believe in therapy. I was like, well, it sounds to me like, A, you should know that just getting into that room is not going to fix anything. And B, other person might not believe the therapy doesn't work. They recognize that I'm going to have to identify and that we're going to have to do the work. And
somebody's going to hold me accountable for
and that work doesn't get done until, generally speaking, maybe not always, but generally speaking, when there are two parties involved in a relationship, both of those parties own some of the dysfunction. And identifying and accountability will be parts for both of you, and that's uncomfortable. That's uncomfortable.
Of course it is. Yeah. And when you're okay. So when you're behaving like this because of trauma, you are doing so because you are terrified. Right? And being held accountable for changing that behavior that you are doing because you think it makes you safe, right, is terrifying too. Mm-hmm. Because you are taking away what I'm perceiving to be the seatbelts that are keeping me safe. So it's a tremendously difficult and arduous and thing to do, and it takes incredible bravery, and it's bravery well beyond saying, oh well, this happened to me. Right, that's a very important step, but that's just the beginning.
Let's move on.
Yes,
but I do want to recommend, I've done it on other shows, but there's a show on Showtime. It's available. It's called Couples Therapy. They have an English one. They have 3 seasons. They have an Australian one. They have a New Zealand one. I think it is the best television/film representation of the actual work of therapy that I've seen. It's not perfect. Of course, there are parts, it's filmed, so there are parts that are not, as raw, but it is the best I think you can see if you're someone who is on the fence about it or is interested in how that process works. It's called Couples Therapy. It's on Showtime.
Okay, so because we all need to move on with the day, I'm going to give it, 37.
Okay.
Self-sealing stem bolts, because it at least triggered thoughts in my brain that might have been personal to me, but Meridian triggered the thoughts that I didn't want to continue taking in oxygen. So, there you go. Folks, what did you think? I'm sure everybody has a million thoughts. Did not know we were going to spend 2 hours talking about therapy, but here we are.
Don't we always?
Don't we always? Tell us what you thought of Let He Who Is Without Sin. Leave it in the comments right here below on the YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast only, hop over to the YouTube. Chip in with your voice. We very much appreciate it.
Or send us an email. You can. We have one.
What's our email?
I guess for this show, it's keithandmikeentertainment@gmail.com.
Sure.
Yeah.
Go check it out. We'll be very happy to hear you. Thank you so much for sitting through and listening to all of that. I've missed doing this. It's really great to get back at it. Definitely, even with this episode, it was a blast.
It's always better with friends.
Mike, have a great opening as you go through. We are Forever Plaid. If you are near Exton, Pennsylvania, where is it?
Ambler, Pennsylvania.
Ambler is one of those. Go to Ambler, Pennsylvania. Go see Mike in Forever Plaid at the theater that it's at. If you happen to be in the area. That'll be, I really don't know how to do a promo. I don't know what it's called.
Well, we do, but just only for wrestling.
Only for wrestling. All right. Anyway, join our Patreon at patreon.com/K&M. Thank you for watching. Till then, this has been Keith and Mike. Watch Deep Space Nine. Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/K&M.
Most people would prefer their butt plugs wet.